All right, let's go. Saab on. I hope this is a convenient time for a lot of people. Hope it's not too late for East Coasters. But I'm just going to get into it. As I said earlier in a post, I really think this is a great idea. This is the only Saab group that I'm a member of, that I haven't got kicked off of, that does this. I think it's a great idea. If we can open up more topics, hey John, I think it'd be great. So welcome. I think it'll take a few minutes for people to sign in, but I'm just gonna forge ahead, okay? Disclaimer, I am a DIYer. I'm not an expert. So anything, any suggestions I come up with, any advice that I give people, any answers that I come up with, use at your own risk. I experiment doing things using different chemicals, you know, things like that. So I've got it pretty down pat what I like to use for my car. What's in the eSub parts box? Let me check. It's taped up. It's for sale on eBay if you want it. It's a T5 boost control valve. Anyway, disclaimer, use at your own risk, okay? I've got good news and bad news. Good news is it's relatively easy to care for leather in a car, on a car seat. The bad news is most of our cars are at least 7 or 8 years old, 10, 15, 20 or more years old. And if the leather is dried and cracked and torn and ripped, game's over. There's not much you can do for it. So that's the bad news. Good news is, though, that some minor imperfections can be fixed pretty easily. My particular theory is that if you have an imperfection or an abrasion or a small rip or a scratch or something like that, you can fix it so it's not so noticeable. What I've noticed in a lot of our cars is that you know, a car is mechanically great, it looks good on the outside, and then you glance at the interior and man, oh man, that especially the driver's seat looks pitiful. And that just kind of turns me off. So I've developed techniques to kind of fix the unsightly defects in the seats. And hopefully by answering some questions tonight, and I'll show you some little examples that I did, maybe it can help somebody out. And I'll always be glad to answer questions via PM or, you know, whatever, while we're live. One thing I will mention, though, is I don't have the dry sense of humor that John Sear has, so don't expect that. And my t-shirt is clean, so, you know, Joe, sorry, you know, my t-shirt isn't as smelly as yours. So what I'm going to do is just make some brief comments, and I've got a bunch of questions here that people submitted earlier that I'll answer. The fact is that there are a multitude of products out there that you can use. They're all billed as, you know, the perfect conditioner or the perfect cleaner or, you know, good products. But I mean, there are hundreds. There are literally hundreds of products you can use. And the truth is that you don't really need most of these products. The way modern leather car seats are made is the raw leather is sent to the tannery. The tannery preps the leather. It chemically takes off the epidermis, which is the skin layer, the top layer, and then the fatty layer underneath, and you're left with 2 layers of leather after that. The top layer that we see, and then the layer underneath, which is the proteins and the fibers and the stuff that gives the strength to the leather. Most cars after early 90s or so have this 2-layer leather, 2 or 3 layers of aqueous water-based pigment, and on top of that a clear coat. So it's similar to the paint on the outside of the car. Now if you have intact leather, like in a new car or a year or 2 old, something like that, nothing you can use is going to make any difference. You're just spending your money, you're wasting your money, nothing's going to absorb in, and the truth is that you don't need to do that. Now, our cars, you know, obviously being so old, we've abraded off that top layer, the protective clear coat layer. So there are some things we can do to either replace that or protect that. But the older cars, you know, that clear coat layer is pretty much gone. So I'll be talking about how to mitigate some of those problems in a minute. The corium, it's called, that the fibrous leather, that is hydrated with water molecules. Over time, those water molecules may dry out. It may dry out your leather. The clear coat is not totally impervious to water. There are little pores that evaporate and then absorb water vapor. So if the car is new, or if the leather is in great condition, all you really got to do is mist down the seat with some water, distilled water better, and wipe it clean. That's it. And that's going to keep the leather hydrated and leather looking good. You don't need to put these expensive treatments on there, conditioners, etc. So one of the most important things you can do, though, is keep the leather clean. And there are various cleaners out there that are good. One I use is this Griot's Garage stuff, and I just mist it on and clean it off. Anyway, so let me start getting into the questions. Brian says, about the bad news, can I clean up imperfections on my Parchment leather? Well, yeah, you can. It depends on what the imperfections are. You know, if it's just dirt, you can clean the dirt, obviously. If it's cracking, bad cracking, you can't really do much about that except do a re-dye job, which, you know, there are many videos online using a filler, and I have a couple photos of the filler job I did on my 9000. It works pretty good, but basically you just got to clean the leather, and you know, if it doesn't look too bad, just keep it clean. So let me get into some other questions here. All right, David says, is it true leather seats from the factory are sprayed with a clear coat? I believe I addressed that, and yeah, that's the reason why all of these fancy conditioners don't do a darn thing if the leather's in good condition. So he asks, does the conditioner actually sink into the seat? Now, all the conditioner does is, you know, sit on the surface. It may provide a protective layer on the clear coat, but it's not sinking in, and it's not doing a darn thing. So might make you feel better because it looks all nice and shiny and kind of the wet look, but you know, it's not doing much. So unfortunately. Somebody asks, let's see, I think Donald asked, what is the best effective, unconventional, not labeled for leather cleaner? For instance, the stuff I showed you is labeled as a leather cleaner. Well, you don't need to spend $8–10 for a leather cleaner. Actually, one of the best leather cleaners, believe it or not, if the leather's not too bad, is this stuff right here. I don't know if you can read it. It's woolite. It's just regular. Actually, this is dollar store woolite. I mix it 1 to 5. Spray it on and wipe it off with a microfiber cloth. If the seat's really dirty, though, that's not going to really cut it. I also Fortunately, my seats aren't that dirty, but there's something else you can do. You can mix lacquer thinner and water 1 to 5. And I did some test strips here. Let's see if I can find them. Okay, this is actually vinyl. And this was really dirty. And I don't know if this is showing up at all. Let me see. Okay, over close to me, I cleaned that with woolite. That's the dirty part. And then over here on the other side, I cleaned with a mixture of lacquer thinner and water. And you just rub gently. You know, there's a chance you could actually rub the surface of the leather. So you got to be really careful. That was vinyl. This is leather. That really bright stripe, that's the natural undirty part. And these other stripes, lacquer thinner 1 to 4, super clean, which you can get at the auto store, and then the woolite over here. So, you know, most of the cleaners you buy at the auto parts store or online are very, very weak cleaners. So if you have tan seats and they're really dirty, you know, those cleaners aren't going to do much. You got to go to something a little stronger. Now, I also have a question here. How about this magic eraser? Magic eraser is pretty darn abrasive. You know, they're good though if you know how to use them. You can use a leather cleaner with this magic eraser. You can use an all-purpose cleaner with this magic eraser. Just don't rub hard. Just lightly over the surface, rub it back and forth. And that will get some of the really dirty seats cleaned up quite a bit. But you got to be careful. Like I said, it could actually rub through the clear coat if it's still good, and it can actually rub through the pigmented dye that's on the seat. So, you know, if you're going to do a re-dye job, it's okay to just scrub it and make it as clean as you can and then proceed on the dye job. Any questions? The very few people that are out there. Any questions yet? Everything I use, I have to put a towel down for a few days after. I don't know what that means, but anyway, let me get to some more questions on my pad here. Ian Stahl asks, and I think it relates to a steering wheel renovation. After you do the Leatherik re-dye program, Leatherik recommends Carnauba wax. What do I think of that? I think, you know, it doesn't matter. I don't think the wax is doing anything. The way steering wheels are finished, there's a pigmented dye over the leather, just like the seats, but the acrylic coating on the steering wheel is pretty thick. So, you know, if that's intact, I don't think wax is going to do anything. Which brings me to commenting about steering wheels. A lot of us in our cars, depending on how we drive, the oils in our skin rub the steering wheels in a certain spot, and it wears away the acrylic coating. And it looks kind of ratty, the leather in that spot. And what can we do to fix it? Well, all you got to do is sand it down, 600 grit, and then go to 1,000 grit or 1,200 grit sandpaper, and then re-dye it. After the dry dyes, then you put an acrylic coating on it. So I have a steering wheel here. I don't know if it's going to show up, but let's take a look. All right, this whole this whole top portion was all worn away. Okay, so what I did is I sanded it down, started with 600 grit, then I went to 1000 grit, and when it was relatively smooth, then I re-dyed it. And I'll show you what I use for dye in a second. After the dye dried, I used an acrylic coating. So this is what it looked like before. I don't know if you can see that, but kind of ratty. And then now it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. So these dyes are not expensive. This is what I use for the steering wheel. You can't see much, but it's Faux leather dye. It's water-based. This one happens to be black. Pretty cheap on Amazon, $8. All you got to do is take a piece of foam, get the dye on there, and just, you know, dab it onto the steering wheel. 1 or 2 coats, let it dry, and then you put this acrylic top coat on it. This is made by Faux as well. It's called Recoloring, and it's a protective acrylic finish for leather, and that does a really good job. Really good job. So steering wheels are really actually pretty easy to fix. All right, another question. Jan asks, is there any way of improving the leather that is shrunk? Well, over time, like I mentioned before, you know, as the water evaporates out of the protein layer of the leather, unless it's rehydrated, it's going to shrink. It's going to become like cardboard. And we've all seen cardboard leather seats. Maybe we all have cardboard leather seats. And there's not much it can do for that, to be honest. But the best that there is Leatherique. Okay, everybody's heard about Leatherique. Probably some people have used it before. This is not a use it one time and fix all problem product. You spray it on, you rub it in, you leave it in a hot car, you put all the windows up, you leave it out in the sun, and depending on how bad the leather is, you leave it for a day or 2. Then you follow it up with the cleaner solution that Leatherique has, and maybe you do it again. And if that cardboard leather has the surface clear coat that's worn off of it and it allows more absorption, the Leatherique will do a real good job. Now, in my 9000, my 95 9000 Aero, the seats in it, the top coat had been all worn off and the dye was starting to wear off. And so I knew that the Leatherique could do a great job because, you know, if the top coat is intact, nothing's going to absorb. Well, if the top coat is not intact, it's going to absorb this Leatherique stuff pretty good. And it did. It softened up my seats very, very well. So, Jan, that's about the only thing you can do is use Leatherique. You might have to treat it 2-3 times. You know, leave it in the sun for a day at a time, and you might get some softening of the leather after that. All right, let's see. Let me just show you a couple things, a couple of the products that I use. You can see this. I mean, this is a common problem. A lot of our cars, can you see the abrasion there? There's an abrasion kind of on the corner of that leather. This is salvage leather from a vegan, and it's kind of abraded down to the protein layer of the leather, and you know it kind of looks bad. Well, there's a way you can fix that. You know, if you don't have too much damage on the seat, I use a product that's really, really good, and it's from a furniture leather company. It's called Recoloring Balm. And what it is, it's a balm with dye in it. So all you got to do with this stuff, let's see if I can put a little on foam or a rag, microfiber, or just on your finger, and just spread it in. It's really thick. It's like a conditioner. You spread it in. Like that. Cover the abraded area, and then wipe it off with a microfiber. So for many of you with black seats that have these abraded areas, fixed. Okay. Now what remains, I mean, that's just the pigment. What remains now is you got to put a top coat of something on there. So I use this stuff. I showed it before, this Recoloring stuff. It's kind of a matte finish. It's a little shinier than a lot of people like. Or this is another thing, you just cover the area with that acrylic, and it's going to protect the pigment underneath. So I'm just going to take some of this, put it on a microfiber. This stuff goes a long way. And the area that I just dyed, I'm just going to wipe it on. And you know, the bolsters, the side bolsters on the bottom and the side bolster on the top, this is a great fix if you have stuff that is worn away. And it looks great. Looks great. I did something earlier today. I took this piece of salvage leather and I took sandpaper to it, scraped it up, and then I fixed both sides of the tape by just using this stuff and the acrylic. So I don't know if this will show, but that's before and after. It's all worn down. On either side of it is fixed. So that's a good technique. Now, I know a lot of people out there have issues with their bolsters. And I'll show you the fix I did on my 9000. And, okay, so when I got this 9000, the seats were in pretty bad shape. You can see there's a tear there, and then it's, you know, it's rubbed, pretty much rubbed raw. Top of the bolster and bottom. So what I did was I got this leather filler. I cleaned it off first. Just a good leather cleaner. Actually, I used the Woolite stuff. Cleaned it off first. Then I wiped it with alcohol. And then I used a leather filler to fill in the cracks. And I also fixed the hole. How I fixed the hole was I cut a piece of cloth backing and I glued it behind the hole. And I filled it in with leather filler. And then I just, you know, sanded it. After the filler I was happy with the filler. And basically that's how it came out. So for those of you who have bolster issues, if the whole seat's not trashed or if there aren't big rents and rips, it's easy to fix. That took me, I don't know, an hour. So, you know, things like that are easy to fix. Here's another photo, a picture I took off the internet just as a demonstration. See if I can find it. That's a common problem in our vegans, right? That's easy to fix. That's easy to fix just using the stuff I showed you. Take your time, sandpaper, 600. And 1000 grit and some of this stuff, and then cover it with this stuff. Now, that big area on the bolster on my 9000, I actually didn't use that dye balm. What I used was this stuff. This is actually a flexible coating that you can use for your seats. As long as you prepare it well enough, you can use that. It's just spray paint. You go on with the light coat at first, and then another coat, a couple coats, and once it dries, you can put the acrylic finisher on top of that to protect it. Let me see. There's more questions here. Tom wanted to know if a worn steering wheel can be refinished. Yeah. It's probably better if you take the steering wheel off the car so you can get a nice even job sanding and dyeing, etc. But you don't have to. I already addressed the leather cleaner. Most of the cleaners you buy are overly mild, so if you're really dirty, you might have to get more aggressive. Most of the time what ruins the top coat on the seats is dirt and or clothing. So if you don't keep the seats clean and you're sliding in and out with jeans are especially abrasive. If you don't keep the seat clean, the coat's going to wear away, and then you're going to go down into the pigment, and then finally into the substrate, the corium of the leather, and then you got to do a repair. So there you go. Dylan asks, if you could recommend one product, what would it be? This is like asking about oil. What oil do you use? What's the best oil? Everybody's got an opinion, but I think what you want to do, if the leather seats have been repaired, if they're in good shape, you just want to keep them in good shape by cleaning them regularly, once a week, once every 2 weeks, and then have some sort of a protection for the clear coat, which is a UV protectant. So as a result, I have landed on a product that I use just because I want the UV protection. And everybody knows this. This is great. This is great stuff for leather. And it's a good UV protectant. If your seats are in decent shape, you just put that on the seat, especially on the back of the headrests in the back. They get a lot of sun. The whole seats, if you got a convertible and leave it out in the sun, that's great stuff. So there you go. How about some questions? Questions from the peanut gallery. I'm not getting flamed like the admins did earlier, so I feel fortunate. Anybody got a question? I'm not sure how this thing works on the side. I don't see it scrolling. Here we go. Here we go. All right. What's the role of heat in degradation? Okay. Well, the role of heat, the corium leather, in the leather is a bunch of proteins, and it's usually hydrated. Heat will cause evaporation, and that's why it's important to keep them hydrated by wiping down with a wet cloth or misting water onto the seat. So what heat does is it causes evaporation, and sometimes it causes the proteins to denature. And when the proteins denature, they get hard. And once that gets hard, it's hard to soften them up again. You can use heat if you have some wrinkles, indentations, things like that, especially in your seat bottom. You can use heat, but use a heat gun, but very judiciously to kind of stretch and even out and kind of rearrange that the substrate of the leather seat. But heat, the biggest damage heat does is the UV from the sun and evaporation. So, all right. Brian says he uses griots as well. Good to know. Okay. I see Joe and Jan and James are here. So Daniel says he's saying it's sticky and greasy, so he cannot sit in seats, which is why he has to put the towel down. Well, first of all, if the seats are greasy, in my opinion, that's wrong, because the grease doesn't do anything but clog the pores of the surface of the leather, and if it's greasy, you know, it's hindering actually the leather. So I don't know if that's a good idea. Daniel, dumb question. Do you leave the leather on the wheel to re-dye? Yeah. I mean, if the leather is so bad that you have to replace the leather, you know, you just cut it off, and you know, that's a whole another topic and process. There are YouTube videos about people ripping leather off their steering wheels and just replacing the leather and restitching it. I'm talking about the mild to moderate wear, where you place your hands and the grease from your hands causes wear. You know, you can usually do it with the leather on the wheel. If the leather is bad enough, you know, you might have to replace it. But the steering wheel I showed you a few minutes ago, it was perfect except for whoever had their hand up there in the 1 o'clock position. It kind of wore the leather down, and it was a quick, easy fix. Took me 10 minutes, no big deal. Ian, wet sand or dry sand? If you're wet sanding, what will happen is, if the leather is exposed, it's going to absorb the water, and when you absorb the water, it's going to swell, and later on, when the water evaporates off, it's going to shrink, and it may become hard, and just, you don't want to get it wet. So dry sand. Okay, we have some comments. Leathereek is sponsor for SOC. Oh, watch for items at the auction. Well, that's great, because this, as you see, I use this quite frequently. Right now, my seats are all in good shape, but a touch-up every once in a while is not a bad idea either. Their product, Pristine Clean, which is supposed to do after you do the rejuvenation stuff, this is good for cleaning anytime. Just wipe it dry. Don't leave it greasy, Daniel. Jan, would there be a top coat on a 93 model year? Probably. Probably would be a top coat. Those of you who are my age may remember getting in cars, older cars, Mercedes especially, and man, the leather smell was great. They had distinctive smells. No new car smells like that anymore, and that's because all of those leathers did not have a top coat. They started top coating probably late 80s, early 90s, and so I would bet that a 93 model year has a top coat. Now, you know, if the top coat's worn off, you can spiff it up a little bit and use, you know, some of this acrylic finisher to fix it up. As a matter of fact, I was working on a vegan headrest the other day. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Okay, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but this is kind of dry, sun damaged, etc. This one I sanded down. I just put a light coat of that leather dye balm over it, buffed it dry, let it dry, and then did an acrylic top coat. So now this has got the acrylic top coat protection, where this one, I think the sun kind of bleached it out and damaged it a little bit. So yeah. All right. Any advice on repairing minor seams that come unsewn? Yeah, you can actually resew these, and there's a website online that has very good instructional videos. It's called sailright.com. What they do is they sell kind of hobbyist sewing machines for making sails and doing leather work, etc. and they have some instructional videos on there. One of the videos is how to repair a seam that has split. And in a nutshell, what you do is you free up thread at either end. You get some real good thread to sew up the seam, usually something that's UV resistant. And you use curved needles, and you start at one end, and you go towards the other end, and then you tie the loose threads that came from the seam at either end, and it makes a decent repair. Otherwise, you have to pull the skin off and re-sew it, and that's, that's fairly expensive if you have somebody do it. It's not really a big deal if you have a sewing machine like I do, and you just got to pull the skin off and re-sew it. But Sailrite.com has an instructional how to fix the seam. Related to that, never kneel on your seat. If you're in the car detailing, don't put your elbow into the seat. The biggest reason why seams come undone is we're kneeling on the seats, and it just breaks the thread. All right, let's see. Having the seats re-dyed, does that hurt the seats? After having them done, there's a certain way you have to take care of them. Well, not really, because the manufacturing process for new cars and our cars when they were new, if they were past, year 1990, etc., they were just dyed. 2 or 3 coats of pigmented dye, and then clear coat, after that. So if the seats are re-dyed, you should know, if you have somebody do it, you should ask if they put a sealer on top of it. And it's a good thing, because the sealer is the clear coat, and you want that sealer on top of it. If the sealer's not on top of it, the dye's just going to rub off. And if the sealer is on top of it, all you got to do to take care of them is just spritz it with some water and wipe with a microfiber rag. All right, let's see. Getting lots of great tips. Vented seats, care for those. Now, vented seats are a little bit different. They do have the clear coat on them, but the holes, the little vents are probably not coated. They're just raw leather. So you can still wipe them down with water. Still clean them the same way. You may be able to get some benefit from something like Lexol, a real thin coat, or any similar product, because that stuff will absorb in. The thing with the vented seats is they dry out very easily if you don't take care of them, and then they split. They go from hole to hole, and it splits in a seam. So you got to take great care of vented seats. Okay, let's see. What about torn seats? Well, what about them? The only thing you can do for torn seats is fix it. And there are things you can do. For instance, my Vigan, when I first got it, had a torn bolster on the bottom seat. I found one in the junkyard, not a Vigan, but Vigan seats, and I took the bottom portion of the seat and I just swapped it out. So that's an option. The other option is, you got to have somebody fix it. They can replace a panel. Problem with replacing a panel is it almost never matches unless it's black. If it's tan or beige or something like that, it is so hard to match. You're going to notice it. But depends on how big the tear is too. I showed you a picture earlier. I'll show it again. I had a little tear in my 9000 that I just fixed. I put a backing piece of fabric in back of it, and I used some vinyl and leather glue, and fixed a tear, but it was small. And I would say that you could probably fix tears that are a couple inches long max. Let me show you the tear. Let's see. Dizzy yet? Okay, right there is the tear. That was about 1 inch long, and I used fabric in back of it, Use a little glue on it, and then I filled it in with leather filler. The leather filler I use, I have a dyed leather filler because my seats are black. This stuff. And this stuff goes on. You can accelerate the drying with a heat gun or a hair dryer, and it's really, really tough. Really, really tough. So, you know, if you have tears, a series of tears, you can fix them and then fill them in. But if they're big, long tears, you just got to get the panel fixed. Has the SEM Classic coat held up well? Yes, extremely well. It's on my bolster. I'm very careful not to drag my fat tuchus over the bolsters. I'm very careful not to scrape the bolster with my belt and jeans when I get into the car. So I take great care to, not slide on that bolster anyway. But the nice thing about this stuff is just redo it. It's not flaking off. If it wears off, just redo it. That particular seat bolster, it took me maybe 2 hours to do. Not a big deal. So it's got flex agents in it. SEM is really good stuff, and I think it's good. It has held up well. All right, Mark, I have a 2005 9.5 and 2006 9.6 with vented seats. Just curious if they require special consideration when looking at leather care. I think I addressed this earlier. The only special consideration is don't get them wet, because the water will soak in. That's about it. Tell us more about using fillers. All right. Fillers are good for small cracks, creases, spider cracks, things like that kind of happen after 20 years to these cars. The stuff is, this is the tinted stuff. Most fillers you'll see online are the white fillers. This dries super strong, but the key is you got to put it on thin. So if you have a deep crack, you got to put it on, let it dry, or accelerate the drying with a heat gun or hair dryer. Sand it, put on another layer, dry it, sand it, another layer, dry it, sand it. It's really easy to use. The problem with fillers is people get impatient and they glop it on and expect it to dry in 10 minutes. And then when it peels off, when you try to sand it, then, they throw it away and think that it's not working. Well, you just thin coats, multiple coats if you have to, and you might want to buy tinted. I've never seen tan filler, only seen black and white. It takes dye well, it takes the paint well, and professionals who fix these seats use filler all the time. All right, let's see. It's a big tear, probably just going to replace the seat. All right, well, that's an option. If it's in the seat bottom, Saab seats are pretty good because the bottoms are basically a component. Well, not the more modern Saab seats. The old classic 900s don't have this, but a couple things I've done to my C900 convertible is I swapped the seat skins. I swapped the driver's side over to the passenger and the passenger to the driver to even out the wear, because to me nothing looks worse than a worn driver's seat and a pristine passenger seat. So I just swapped them over. The Vigans and the 9.3s, you just take the seat bottom, it's 4 bolts basically, and just plop it in if you can source one somewhere, junkyard or something like that. All right, Semi-Aniline seats. I don't know anything about semi-aniline seats, I have to admit. All I know is our Saabs don't have semi-aniline seats. Our Saabs have pigmented dye and top coat unless it's a real old Saab. Will this video be rewatchable? I think so. I don't know. And you can always PM me if you have questions. What else? What else? See if I have any other questions here. Well, let me show you that piece that I dyed earlier where it was worn, and then I covered with the top coat. That's what it looks like. So if you have a bolster that just has some wear and some of the dye is gone, easy fix, easy fix. What else do I have here? I have some more products, I think. Nah, I'm out of products. No more products. Any more questions? Let me see if there's anything else I want to mention. What time is it? 7:46. We'll go for 14 more minutes and then call it quits, okay? Let's see. Ty asks, I have never found an off-the-shelf leather cleaner that worked. What gives? Well, I think I mentioned this earlier. The companies, first of all, want to separate you from your money. And most of the so-called leather cleaners are weak. They're just not strong enough. So if your seat is especially if it's a tan or beige seat and it's really, really dirty, some of those off-the-shelf leather cleaners is not going to work. So then what you've got to do, you've got to test in a small area that's not obvious different things. Like I mentioned earlier, the woolite mixture, 1 in 5. Maybe you want to use lacquer thinner, 1 to 5, and rub it with a microfiber cloth. And then maybe you want to go the next step up and use a, one of these magic eraser things. Be really careful though. The combination of the lacquer thinner and the magic eraser can rub that surface right off. So the off-the-shelf stuff is good for maintenance. It's good if you have a new car and you're cleaning your seats every 2 weeks. Most of our cars and the previous owners were probably not as meticulous as us, keeping them clean and looking good. It's gonna take some experimentation to clean those seats. Now, something that I did in my my classic 900 convertible, my front seats were dirty, and there were some cracks. And when the leather cracks, that's the area that loses pigments first. So not only do you have unsightly cracks, you have cracks with no pigment in it. So I did a re-dye on the front seats, just the seating surfaces, because most of the other surfaces on the seats in these cars are vinyl anyway. So in the seating surfaces, I did a really good cleanup job. I used lacquer thinner and water mixture. I used a microfiber pad. I did not rub too hard. I got all of the surface clean, and then I re-dyed. Let me see. I got this stuff from, I forget where it's called, Seat Doctors, and it was supposedly the correct color for my car, but it was a little bit darker than my seats. So what I had to do is I had to mix a little of this with a little of this, which is available in any craft store, and I just put a drop in. I had a little receptacle. I put some of this dye in, and I did a drop at a time of the white and I mixed it and I tested it until I got the exact color match of the seats. And then I took foam like this, and I just dabbed the whole seat. Dabbed the whole seat, maybe going a little thicker over the cracks, and came out good, came out great. So, you know, they're not perfect. They're not like new seats, but both front seats match. There's not one more worn than the other, and it looks great. Okay, let's see. Dash care. Vinyl dash care. All you need is a UV protectant. This stuff. Don't use anything with silicones in it. Don't use anything with grease in it. Don't use anything with oils in it. Use 303 protectant only, and that's you know, that's the stuff to use. All right. Small hair cracks, use filler, right? Any brand. Is that a question? Let's see. I think I have some white filler somewhere. Can't find it. Yeah, small cracks you can use filler on. Let me. Yeah, I don't have anything that has cracks in it. You just got to go slow and let it dry. That's all. And then sand, and then dye, and then top coat it. That's it. What are your thoughts on mink oil for leather care? Well, mink oil is great for leather boots. It's great for leather backpacks. It's great for leather gloves. Not so great for leather seats that are coated with a clear coat. Plus, it kind of smells a little bit. You know, if you want your car to smell like leather, get a leather scented spray. Chemical Guys has a good one that I use, but not much is going to bring out the leather smell from the seats. You know, as a matter of fact, a good way to tell if your leather is coated is smell. Get right up, smell. You don't smell the leather. Now the back of it, you smell the leather. So if you smell leather in a car, it's probably not the seats. It's probably some sort of a chemical they put in there. All right. How do you tell vinyl is leather? You mentioned seating surface versus vinyl. Okay, well, you'd obviously have to look at the back of it. Companies are very good now at making what they call pleather. As a matter of fact, when we went to buy my wife her Toyota a few years ago, you couldn't even buy leather. It was called pleather, and it's got grains in it, and it looks great. But really, the only way to tell is to cut it or to look at the back surface. So hold on. I don't know if you can see this, but this is the back surface of a hunk of leather. It looks like suede because in the tanning process, all the chemicals kind of leach, you know, kind of burn off all the basically flesh from the undersurface of the leather, and it leaves this suede type surface. As a matter of fact, all suede is the top grain taken off. So this has a top grain. Top grain is shaved off, and you're left with suede. But to tell the difference between leather and vinyl, you got to look at the back. This is vinyl. It's obviously fabric, right? You can see the fabric on there. Most, like I said before, most seating surfaces are leather, but the trim, you know, the bottom part and the backs, they're usually vinyl, unless it's a, you know, very expensive car and you've ordered it that way. super informational. Thanks for spending your time. Oh, that's great. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were here then, I think this is a great idea. I'd like to see other topics covered. Maybe, I don't know, oil. Just kidding. Tires, you know, performance modifications, tunes, you know, stuff like that. Audio, things like that might be good topics. What else? Any more questions? I'm not too good at ad-libbing, but let me see, what other tips have I used? I can't really, this is a laptop and I'm not sure. I don't have, yeah, I do. I could take you out to see the seat in my 9000 that I repaired some time ago to see how it's holding up. Anybody up for that? Let's see. Let's see if everybody gets seasick. Take you out to see the seat. It's my garage. We pop the garage door. That's the car I'm taking to SOC. That's a 94 9000 CSE. It's got 55,000 miles on it. Now the leather seats in that thing are perfect. It's starting to get dark here, so I don't know if we're going to be able to see the seat repair. I did this seat repair, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah, it's too dark. Too dark. Now, take my word for it, it's a good repair. And like I say, I don't drag my arse over the bolster, so I kind of, you know, preserve it. Let me see if I can show you the convertible. Sorry about this connection. Okay. So these are the seats I re-dyed. And I moved the passenger seat over to the driver's side, and I moved the driver's side over to the passenger seat. So they look pretty good. Let me get back in here where the signal might be a little better. Maybe we could do, you know, if I had a better camera set up, maybe we could do you know, some real-time leather repair at some point. Okay. Have I messed with carpet dye? Yes, I have. Before I became a Saab fanatic, I was a Volvo 240 guy. And I don't know if Alan Penny is on here or not, but he's the guy who got me into Saabs about 8 years ago. I live in Alabama. Alan lives in Rhode Island. We were in the Coast Guard together. So we've kept in touch over the years. And he always used to yank my chain for working on Volvo 240s. You know, he used to try and get me to come over to the Saab world, and I just knew 240s too well, and I knew every nut and bolt in the thing and how to fix anything. And so what I used to do is I used to buy 240s and totally refurbish the interior. Sometimes I would replace the carpet. Other times I'd dye the carpet. And there's two or three different methods of dyeing. One of them is just take the carpet out of the car and use actual fabric dye in a vat and soak it in the vat and, you know, dye it that way. That's really messy. The other way is just to use some of this stuff. You want to make sure you are in a well-ventilated area. Probably the best thing to do would be to pull the seats out. But that stuff does a great job on the to refresh the carpets too. You know, makes the loop a little stiff on the carpet, but you know, it makes it look a lot better. So I used to, when I refurbed the Volvos, until Alan talked me into coming over to the Saab world 8 years ago, I would, as a matter of routine, do something to the carpets that were faded, especially faded from the sun. And SEM has a great selection of colors. You can just check out their website, and you can pretty much match your carpet and just spray it on. And the way I used to do it is I'd spray it on, and I'd you know, brush it in. So good stuff. All right, I think we've been at this an hour. Let's see if there are any more questions. Can't really show you the cars because it's dark. I can show you that 9000 again before I sign off. All right, any takers? Here we go. This thing is was originally bought in California. Older gentleman owned it. He lived in Texas. He became old and had Alzheimer's, and his nephew dragged the car over to Colorado, and I bought it out of Colorado. When I bought it, the seats had covers on them, and I took the covers off, and under the covers were these perfect leather seats. So this will be at SOC. I can't wait to meet some of you there. You know, we touch base a lot on Facebook, and it's always nice to meet the person face to face and have a few beers, and can't wait. So I'm signing off. Anybody's free to PM me with questions, recommendations where to buy some of these things, you know, how to do certain things. I'd be glad to help. That's what Saab community is all about. Saab on.